Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, June 4th, 2020, and you've tuned into the Rebel News live stream. I apologize for being a little late, but we had some technical issues, and as my Ryerson professor once told me way back in the early 80s, and it was the most profound thing I took away from my 3 years of journalism school, it was this: machines are out to screw you. But thank goodness for our great trained broadcast professional, Justin, aka Mr. Producer. He has put things back together again. And just a little about this live stream, if you're a new viewer, usually our big boss man, Ezra Levant, he's in this chair. But every Tuesday and Thursday, Sheila Gunn-Reid and I, and that's Sheila on the other half of the screen, we take over because the boss is working on a very super special project. And Sheila Gunn-Reid, good afternoon to you. And I think this is the part where you tell any newbies what it is we're actually hoping to accomplish here.
Sure, David, I'm surprised to see you without your hat. Your hat has grown on me. I found it annoying before, but yeah, it became part of your shtick, like so many of the other things you do.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'll bring back the hat. I'll tell you why I was wearing the hat. As you know, the hat was born out of me frightening a CBC reporter. And I'm not making this up, folks. I guess so much for her goal to be assigned to the Afghanistan Bureau. If my hair, and I admit,
your hair's a war zone.
Oh, and compared to her hair, which I thought was lovely, my hair was swirling around in the wind, and she was running backwards into Queen's Park Crescent, where cars are whipping around at 70 clicks. And I was actually quite fearful for our state broadcaster. And and I always thought, Sheila, the left was against body shaming, or in this case, hair shaming. So I didn't frighten any more state broadcasters. I put the hat on. And then, well, lo and behold, I got a black market haircut. And I thought, maybe I better cover that up. I don't want to be seen as too rebellious and just, sticking it right out there in the faces of John Tory and Doug Ford. And then I got, well, wait a minute, we are rebels here, so maybe I should flaunt my new haircut. I won't give the name of my barber, of course. He'll lose his license, because that's the way we roll in Toronto, Ontario. But if you think it's been growing on you, Sheila, I can always bring it back in. But then I get people, they say, according to hat etiquette, I'm not supposed to wear it indoors. It's so confusing, Sheila. I don't know what to think.
I'm just happy that low-flying birds are not in danger anymore of getting caught in your hair. But yeah, back to what we're doing here. This is our daily noontime live chat. Unfortunately, we were just a little bit late today because of technical difficulties. Ezra hosts Monday, Wednesday, Friday. David and I host Tuesdays and Thursdays because Ezra's got a really big project that he's working on. And it gives us a chance to interact with each other and sometimes get completely off track like we did just there. But it also gives you a chance to interact with each other in the live chat. There's always a lively debate there. And I always go back and read all the chats just for fun. Some of you are pretty funny. And it also gives you a chance to support us by donating through a super chat. Now, YouTube takes some of the money. I suppose that's fair. It's their platform. They developed it. But we get some of the money, and it helps us pay the bills, helps us bring you the other side of the story, and it allows you to support us completely willingly, as opposed to what happens with the CBC, where they forcibly extract $1.5 billion out of your pocket to create things that you don't want to watch and that you don't want to pay for, but you absolutely have to.
Indeed.
So that's what we're doing here.
And you know what? Speaking of giving some updates, I cannot believe it, but our newest Rebel reporter, Anna Slatz, is apparently still in jail. And if that changes, what'll happen probably, folks, is Ezra will come in and he will literally slide me off to the side. These chairs are on wheels. Now I know why. And he'll give you the most recent update. That's what Ezra did to me yesterday. It was hilarious. I loved it. Sheila, what do you make of this? It seems that she was just caught up in, I guess, a kenneling of people who were breaching curfew. She should be exempt. because she is a journalist and she had credentials. So we're not clear why she wasn't exempt or why her credentials weren't accepted. But as we wait on finally making contact and finally getting her out of jail, and I think that is indeed going to happen sometime this afternoon, I can't help but think, Sheila, we were mentioning CBC News reporters earlier. Could you imagine what would have happened, what the media landscape, what the Twitterverse would look like if a CBC reporter had been detained, for, I guess, 2 nights now in a New York jail for practicing journalism? Wow.
Yeah, it's been complete radio silence, save for the Post-Millennial, our friends over at True North, and a smattering of the few conservatives, and not even conservatives, but also just open-minded people who believe in press freedom over at the Toronto Sun. That's it.
Yeah.
CBC doesn't care that Anna, this young, innocent woman, has been in a jail with Antifa terrorists and crackheads and hookers and drug dealers for 2 days. I mean, I can't think of a much worse place to be than the Brooklyn Central booking.
Sheila, I'll challenge you on that point. I don't think it's a matter of the CBC doesn't care. I think they care deeply, and I think they haven't reported this, of course, but I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, good, you see, you so-called journalists who are not government funded like we are, the official trained seals of the Trudeau regime. This is what happens to you when you try to, get into our game. I really think they believe that. I really think they are cheering that this is a good thing, that a citizen journalist or somebody that works for outside of the mainstream media has been actually incarcerated. I really do believe that, Sheila.
And here's the thing, too. We've had support from journalistic organizations from the United States. Yeah. Anna is a Canadian. Where are the Canadian journalist associations? Furthermore, the Liberals will absolutely not shut up about press freedom when it serves them. Yeah. All the while, strong-arming journalists out of press conferences and trying to block me from attending press conferences in London. Okay, let's go back a step. The consulate is involved now, trying to help Anna. We got the consulate involved. Our lawyers did. Our 5 lawyers who are working on the case. Yeah. Because we're absolutely doing everything we can. I know that if I ended up in jail, Ezra would move heaven and earth to help me. My family would be worried sick. We all recognize that. We're doing everything we can to help Anna, because what else can we do? Yeah. And we got the consulate involved. Now, our foreign minister, Chrystia Freeland, she's our former foreign minister, but she was a former journalist, and she too will not shut up about press freedom when it serves her. She hosted a press freedom conference in London. That's when they tried to block me from a press conference, but that's a whole other story. Where is she on this? Where's the announcement from the former journalist, who is also the former foreign minister, to defend our Canadian journalists when now the consulate is involved? It's the cone of seclusion dealing with these people. They actually hate us more than they actually care about Anna being imprisoned for doing her job as a journalist. And that is truly appalling. It is,
and it is crazy, Sheila, because going back last May, and by that I mean May of 2019, when Efren and I went down to cover a World Press Freedom event at Chorus in Toronto, which is a media company, and there were lots of journalists there, and the Speaker of Honor was Mariam Monsef. And I could see I was left off the Q&A list, so I decided to, as Monsef left the stage, follow her and get a few questions in about her commitment to press freedom. Well, to cut a long story short, Efren and I were eventually frog marched out of a media organization for practicing journalism on World Press Freedom Day.
I know.
I mean, you couldn't write this stuff, Sheila. So they talk about it all they want, but what they really mean is we like a. There we are. There's me interviewing Miriam Monsef, and as she runs away from me with her handlers.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was one of those interviews, Sheila, that it's kind of like, what kind of car do you drive? And the answer is, my drapes are green. She doesn't even answer the questions. This is the point where I'm going to be locked out of the hermetically sealed cone of silence for the minister. And then, of course, we're told to get lost and we're given the bum's rush. So what they do is they approve and applaud a certain media narrative, but if you're too contrarian for their appetite, you are dismissed, you are condemned, or you're ignored. And we're just seeing that happen again with Anna in New York. I mean, this should be a cause celeb, but a cause celeb for the CBC is some Lugan walking by, typically a female reporter, and saying the blanker right in the you-know-where, that very vulgar phrase. Is it vulgar? Yes. Did the reporter deserve that? No. But it's just some idiot saying something, obscene. It's not getting thrown in jail for practicing journalism. And they're quiet on that. But for something like this, they file police reports. I can't believe we haven't had a royal commission yet about that. But what a double standard, eh, Sheila?
Yeah, and if people want to see the journalism that Anna was doing from on the ground, and I mean, she was doing just straight journalism. She was on the front lines of a riot. She's, from what I could see, at least from her last footage, very close to the police, obeying what the police were telling her to do. I mean, she was walking right beside them. They can go to stopantifa.com, and if they want to help what we're doing in hiring all these lawyers. And we sent Yankee down. So Yankee is one of Anna's friends, but he also works for us. And we sent him down there just so that she could be greeted by a friendly face when she gets out of jail. And here's the thing. Anna doesn't know anything that we've done for her. Ezra had, like you said, maybe a 20-second phone call with her. Before the police took her phone away.
That's right.
And that's really been all the communication we've had with her. So I don't think she knows how hard we've been working to get her out, but not just how hard we've been working to get her out, but how much people actually care that she's there. And maybe the politicians don't care, and maybe Canada's press freedom organizations don't care, but the people care. And they're very worried about Anna, as we should be. I mean, jail's not a nice place to be, but they can donate to help out cover the legal costs at, I believe it's saveannaslats.com, and anything that doesn't go towards covering the legal costs will just go to Anna. She's really been through the ringer. I mean, imagine reporting on the front lines of a riot for 3 days and then you're in jail for 2. I mean, what a horrible, horrible, horrible week for poor Anna. I mean, it just a nightmare. But again, that's at saveannaslats.com.
It is horrible. And by the way, to prove your point that our viewers care, and thank goodness for our viewers, they're just the most wonderful people, Sheila. I just noticed on the screenshot that went up there that we've already exceeded our goal. Wow, my heart goes out to you, folks, because especially during these times, there's so many people out of work. There's so many people working with reduced hours. To answer the bell like that for Anna, that is just absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure if Anna was here or we could get a phone call with Anna, she would thank you personally from the bottom of her heart too. But now, speaking of before we get to another injustice in the restaurant business, Sheila, I believe we have some super chats.
We do have some super chats, but before we go on from that, I just want to make note that today is, I believe it's the 31st anniversary of Tiananmen Square, June 4th and 5th of 1989. Student uprising in Tiananmen Square. We've all seen the images of Tank Man, the one man who stood in front of the lineup of CCP tanks that came in to quell the protests. At one point, there were 1 million protesters in Tiananmen Square. And estimates are that hundreds to possibly thousands of people died in that 2-day crackdown of those democracy protests. And unfortunately, I worry that we're seeing a repeat of that happening in Hong Kong right now, and the world doesn't seem to care. I know just today, incidentally, anniversary of Tiananmen Square, the government in China, and by default, Hong Kong, has passed a law that says that criticism of the anthem and being disrespectful to their anthem is completely illegal. So that's a law directed at rounding up protesters in Hong Kong. They've created a law so that they can round up peaceful protesters in Hong Kong, denying them their free speech to be critical of the anthem of murder and oppression. So I just wanted to make note of that before we go on. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that being remembered in the mainstream media, but for us, freedom, democracy, free speech, the free press, it's very important. And in 31 years, we forgot the lessons of Tiananmen Square. We're just completely ignoring what's happening in Hong Kong right now.
I would counter that, Sheila, with we have a certain federal leader who maybe embraces what happened in Tiananmen Square. Don't ever forget that 6 years ago, Justin Trudeau in this city said he admires the basic dictatorship of China in terms of getting things done. I wonder if his admiration extended to putting down protests as what happened 31 years ago in Tiananmen Square. As you said, Sheila, the death toll is always quoted, hundreds, perhaps thousands. We'll never know how many people died. Imagine that, thousands of people dying just to get a point of view across. So I'd really love to, if I ever get to query Justin Trudeau, because we know the trained seals in the media party would never say that. Was this part of your admiration for communist China, Mr. Prime Minister? Please enlighten me. Anyways, I digress.
Yeah, and speaking about just how we'll never know, we don't even really know the name of Tank Man.
That's right.
The man his name, the Sunday Express in the UK thinks they found his name. His name is Wang Weilin. They think he was 19 years old. And he was either imprisoned and never released or executed, but his family is too scared to say. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with China, and nothing has changed since then.
That's the ultimate cancel culture, isn't it, Sheila?
Yeah. And I mean, and to think that this sort of thing could easily be replicated in a heartbeat in Hong Kong. And so many leaders in the West are just too scared to annoy China to say anything about it, including our own leaders. I mean, you want to talk about real refugees? Those are real refugees. Because if something goes sideways in Hong Kong, and it looks like it could very quickly, where do the people of Hong Kong go? Where do they go? Who will take them? They're not the right sort of refugees for Justin Trudeau.
Incredible.
Okay, we've got, anyways, I could talk about how evil China is all day long, but we've got some super chats to get to. We've got one from Cal McGregor, gives us $10 Canadian, says, David, any news of Kevin J. Johnston? Miss you working with him when the Rebel Yell existed. Deep fried haggis. That sounds awful, David. I don't follow Kevin J. Johnston very closely. He's more of a Toronto phenomenon.
Yeah, I think Kevin J. Johnson, he's kind of, underground right now. The last time I spoke to him, he's actually looking at, and I don't know if he'll be successful, of moving to the United States. And, I wish him well there. But, Kevin's an odd duck. I mean, he's someone that kind of does cross the line when it comes to libel and slander. And that's the thing, Sheila. We here at the Rebel, we're not afraid of espousing an opinion, but we want to be factually bulletproof. And I think that is Kevin's downfall. And I want to say this to anyone who wants to get into journalism, who wants to be a citizen journalist. It is not, there's no problem with going against the grain. In fact, this is what we do every day here, but you have to be factually correct. You can't say things that are not true, because there are laws like libel and slander and defamation, and it applies to social media just as much as it applies to old-fashioned, old-school print media, and you've got to still play within those rules, and rightfully so, Sheila, because we don't want to accuse people of falsehoods, accuse them of being something they're not. And that's why we endeavor to fact check our stuff before it's broadcast.
Yeah, we definitely have several layers of fact check in our company before things go live. We also have, I wouldn't call it tone police, but just to make sure that we aren't stepping over any lines. We also have someone who does that for us. And one of our, no, I think it is, our largest expense outside of salaries is legals.
Yeah.
And that's to make sure that we don't step in it. Some of it is, of course, doing work like fight the fines and real civil liberties work like that. But it's also having a lawyer on standby when, you know, you find this detail and you want to say this one thing, but you also want to be sure that you're not running up to a line and then jumping right over it with both feet. We have lawyers on standby who will take a look at the stuff that we're going to say in our videos before they go out to make sure, yes, we're factually accurate. Yes, it is this opinion we're expressing is based on this set of facts, and so that's fine. And that's what we do, and that's why we haven't gotten in trouble so far, knock on wood, with that kind of stuff, because we have the systems in place to make sure that we do. We've got super chat from Sobieski, $10 Canadian. You would think that the way the USA protesters and looters are violating physical distancing rules, they would all be getting all three of the Wuhan sneeze mutations and being admitted to the hospitals en masse. I suppose we'll see in 14 days now, won't we? Or I guess a week from now, maybe. But it's funny how the virus is over.
Yep.
The virus has ended now that people have a cause that they want to go out and protest, and somehow their cause has made them immune to the health ramifications they insisted were out there just, a week ago. Very strange.
Yeah, no, I mean, Sheila, and I've gone into areas that are, you would think, hotbeds. Well, certainly long-term care homes. I've visited a couple of those. The airport, mass protests at Queen's Park where social distancing is not in effect and nobody's wearing a mask, or just about nobody's wearing a mask. And, it proves my point that I've been saying since we got a better understanding of the Wuhan virus, that if you're relatively young and relatively healthy, you're not going to die. That this is being blown out of proportion. And the stats paint that 82% of the deaths, Sheila, in Canada at long-term care homes. I mean, what does that tell you? And this Saturday at 12 noon at Queen's Park, that's protest number 7. And I can tell you many of these protesters were there from protest number 1 back in April. And in theory, if they've been exposed to this virus, they should be either in hospital or dead by now, but they're still healthy and boisterous. And even though Doug Ford calls them a bunch of yahoos and he'd rather they'd confine themselves to their kitchen and bake cherry cheesecake, that ain't happening. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how many of those people out protesting would also say that the virus is making it too dangerous for them to go back to work, and please continue sending my CERB payment. Yeah. I wonder what the intersection of those two groups are. I bet you the middle part is quite large. We've got one from Kane and Mark with a bit of a told you so directed at me. He gives us $10 Canadian. Thank you, Kane. Says, I told you, Sheila, last Thursday having Kian on this was a good idea. He was very good yesterday. I think he should come on 5 or 10 minutes on Ezra's show. Look, I didn't need the convincing. Kian's one of my favorite journalists in the world. It's like being a mom. It's hard to pick which is your favorite between Ezra and Kian and David and Anna. But Yeah, I think Kian is a wonderful addition to the live streams, and he does a great job. And he's a funny guy, and he's really great at thinking on his feet. As you can see, when he ends up in all these altercations with people, he always has something sassy and smart to say, which I kind of appreciate. We've got one from Pink Phoenix Nails, gives us $10 Canadian. How good is this camera that people can see that I have half a greenhouse under my fingernails right now? Says, hey, Sheila, I'd love to give you one of my signature Pink Phoenix Nails Swarovski manicures. You work so hard. I'd love to pamper you. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I might take you up on that as soon as we're allowed to do that. But I'd be happy to pay, and thank you very much. But yeah, I guess the camera is a lot better than I thought it was. Okay, we've got one from Ryan Ross. He gives us $5 Canadian.
Thank you.
Buy Bitcoin. Canada officially recognizes Bitcoin as currency. Proud Boys Calgary. Hi, Justin. Gives us $2.79. On my way to my own BM haircut. Black market haircut. Yeah. Daily reminder, CCP must be destroyed. Text me a picture of that haircut later, Justin. I'm quite interested to see. Alan McLean gives us $10 Canadian. Why are the billionaires funding worldwide Antifa destruction not dealt with by the CIA or appropriate government agencies? You know, I think declaring Antifa a terrorist organization is a way of dealing with the funding issue, but who's sending these people money? Because I think Gavin McInnes actually did a video about like the levels of Antifa, and there's just like the basically the useless idiots, frontline rioters who are often kind of paid, and a lot of them are just like homeless people, just willing to do just completely exploited, homeless people, drug addicts, whatever, to do the dirty work that gets you locked up by the police. And then above that is like the professor's kids, and then he's got like the lawyers, and then like the politicians, and then the big funding billionaires. And I think declaring them a terrorist organization will allow officials to track where some of that money is coming from, because it's coming from somewhere. These people, I mean, when you look at the people being arrested at these things, they don't have money. So how's the organization happening?
Well, it's funny, Sheila, last night I called this organization Antifa Light. They were, I got to be honest.
Were they Antifa Light or Antifa White? It used to be the same thing.
Antifa Light, yeah, there was not a lot of personal hygiene going on there, but it was so sad. They were outside the American consulate in Toronto, and they were just reduced to hurling vulgar rhyming couplets around, like 1, 2, 3, 4, this is effing class war. And but you know what? I walked away happy, Sheila, because I'd rather you just hurl vulgar rhyming couplets than bricks and Molotov cocktails. But
yeah.
they were so. And again, you wade into the crowd like I do. I don't know why. I'm kind of like Charlie Brown. This is the time Lucy will hold the football and let me kick it. I got a good feeling about this, and you just get profanity and insulted that you're a fascist or a Nazi without any basis to back it up. As I keep telling these people, my grandfather spent more than 5 years of his life fighting the actual real fascists and Nazis in the Second World War. But I do subscribe to what you just said. There are definitely various levels of Antifa, I guess, and if to put a sporting analogy, if the Blue Jays are in Major League Baseball, the group I saw last night, it wasn't even AAA, AA. It was kind of like rookie league ball, right? They were just, they were kind of cute in their stance of, giving it to the man.
And they think they're so smart when they're cursing at you. Like they think, if they hate me and they hate you and they've got this like festering, burning, passionate hate for me. And they've been waiting for their big chance to tell me off because I said something smart to them on Twitter and it really irritated them. And they're like, all they could come up with was like the George Costanza, like, like the joke store called or whatever, the jerk store called. That's like their best comeback. And they've got this like burning hate, and they see me in real life, and this is their chance to tell me off.
I know.
And all they can say is, F you, Sheila, you're ugly.
I know.
It's like, you had your big chance and you blew it with something so stupid.
Anyway. And I keep thinking there was this one gal there, and she was wearing a T-shirt, and it said "The Lesbian Avengers," and I really wanted to know if that was a Marvel spin-off movie on the actual Avengers, and and of course Hollywood is so woke, I wouldn't put it past them, Sheila.
Yeah, don't give these people ideas.
I always had my suspicions about the Black Widow, I gotta tell you, but anyway.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh gosh. It's we've been on air for 35 minutes and we haven't even got through the first batch of super chats. Okay, I better get through them. We've got one from MVP for $5 Canadian. Journalism standards around the world have really slipped. So glad the Rebel is bucking this trend. Well, thank you very much. We work hard to make sure that we've got all of our facts straight before things go live. That's for sure. Even if we have to sit on a story for a day or two just to make sure that it's right. Being right is the most important because our credibility is attached to that, and your trust in us, because it's the internet. You can fact check us in real time. Yep. That's why I publish the documents that I use when I do access to information, and I cite the page number so that you can follow along with me and make sure that I'm saying exactly what is written there, so that you can see for yourself. And then you also have that argument and that information to take on into the world to change hearts and minds if you see fit to do that sort of thing. We've got one from Paul Trapiel, gives us $10. And I don't see a super chat, but thank you very much. We've got one from Rastaman, gives us $2. Liberalism equals communism. I have a T-shirt that I forget who said it. And it says that communism is just a socialist who really means it. And that's true. I mean, it's just we're playing fast and loose with the words. Somebody wants it fast and violent, and someone wants it slow. But I guess in the end, the outcome is still the same. Oh,
there you go again. There you go again, Sheila, wearing those T-shirts with slogans on them. I mean, we had that discussion the other day. I won't repeat it, but carry on.
Today's is a bow hunting T-shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Very distracting.
Yes. The Kavorka's rearing its ugly head, but I suppose it's my turn. Mad Dog Steve gives us $10 Canadian. Shout out to Sheila, the most attractive news broadcaster in Canada. Well, there's no accounting for taste. Thank you very much.
Am I allowed to endorse that, or does that get me in trouble with human resources here?
We don't have a human resources department. Well, it's like, are you offended? No. Okay, then this doesn't need to go any further. And we've got one from Bruiser Battersby, gives us $20 Canadian. Have either of you read anything regarding the current conflict at the China-India border? I have not. Apparently, the Chinese military has started moving deeper into the country after India's military retreated. I haven't read anything about that. However, that wouldn't surprise me. Imperialist China has never really ended. It just sort of changed. They have taken over our countries through a virus and economic reliance on China. So they sort of control our foreign policy in that way. We've got one from Debauchy, gives us $5 Canadian. CBC, CTV, Global, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and RT News are fueling hatred, racism, and violence. They lie, twist the facts, and heavily edit their footage from the truth. Yeah, perspective really is everything, isn't it? I think it was CNN. Was it? I think it was CNN. There was a news reporter standing in a pothole to make it look like the hurricane he was covering was much more devastating than it was, or standing in a ditch, where the water would collect, and he was standing in there to make it look like the whole neighborhood was underwater when it was, the ditch. I could find a ditch and film a hurricane if I had to. And some bystander captured that. I think also with these riots, there's some footage, and maybe Justin can find it. I don't know. But it was like a protester, a Black Lives Matter protester holding a drill, fixing a store that was being boarded up. And it was basically a photo op for Instagram. Somebody else filmed her running up, holding the drill, getting the photo, thanking the guy for letting her take the photo, and then she jumped in her fancy car and drove away. Yeah. So yeah, not everything you see is real.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, folks.
The Covington Catholic School kids is a great example of this. Now that I'm talking about it, we saw like the one clip of the smug, smiling kid. And every teenage boy at that age has that smug, smiling look on their face, no matter what they're doing. They could be in church, feeding the homeless, and that's the little smug look they have. Anybody who's had a teenage boy knows this. It doesn't mean anything. You don't take it personally. It's just their face. But then when you saw it all in context, you could see that the boys were the victims. And the news media just ran with this narrative that these racist, white privileged, private Catholic school boys were abusive to this Indigenous activist, when it was these pro-life Catholic school boys had been the victims of abuse from not only that guy, but the Black Israelites also, and being targeted for their religion by these people. And, we saw very little retractions based on that once people saw the full context of the footage.
But you know what, Sheila, in that case, that's okay, because that kid is soon going to be a very, very rich kid with the settlements that are going to come in. So good on him.
Yeah, and you would think that the mainstream media would learn a lesson, but they won't.
No.
They'll go broke being wrong instead of just learn a lesson.
Well, and in this country, they just put their hand out for a handout from from taxpayers, right? So if you're the tightrope walker and you know there's a safety net under you, maybe you can you can be a little more flagrant with your risk taking, because you're not going to get hurt.
Yeah, and that's why we lawyer everything, because we don't have
the safety net.
We've got one from Andy, gives us $6.99 Canadian. Look at the court system in Alberta being closed for 3 months with no plan to reopen. Judges getting paid for no work. Cases not going ahead. Injustice. Yeah, I think it's the same all over. Some things are some pre-trial conferences are being done through video conferencing, but things have really ground to a halt in justice systems all over the country. Hopefully they can reopen in phase 2 of Alberta. I'm not sure if they're included in that, but that's another thing. The backlog caused by all of this. How many people are going to win charter rights complaints because they weren't able to get to court in a timely fashion, and thus have their charges drop and then go free when they are probably obviously guilty? Who knows? But that's one of the consequences of the pandemic, I suppose. Raging Old White Hobbit gives us $5 Canadian. So what do you guys think of Ezra hiring a self-avowed Marxist who is a member of the Communist Party in BC? We're a free speech organization. So, I mean, we don't have a values test before you join the company. I'm sure David and I might disagree on some things. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I know we have had in the past conservatives who work for the company that were kind of pro-dairy cartel, and Kean is absolutely anti-dairy cartel. And, that's fine. Anna believes in free speech. She definitely has been on the vexatious transgender activist beat. She believes in people's right to protest, and I do too. And I've helped organize protests about the carbon tax and things like that. So, I mean, it's okay that you have people who share different views than you. We're not like the CBC. We don't have a panel of completely homogenous attitudes at the company. We're more diverse, I suppose, than the mainstream media. I think I handled that question well, don't you think, David?
Thumbs up for you, Sheila.
We've got one from Derek G, gives us $5. Do you guys believe Canada will eventually break apart and or merge with USA? I don't know about the merging with the USA part. I always say it depends on what they're willing to offer us. But if things continue down the path they are on, the separatist sentiment in Alberta is rising. It has been on the rise. It's probably as vocal and active as it has ever been historically. However, it doesn't really have someone who's willing to like lead that and examine the constitutional abilities for Alberta to leave. And there's a template sitting there in Quebec. Just go and research it and apply it to the Alberta situation. Nobody's really done that yet. So until such time that somebody really does that and seriously and with a seriously credible big voice who's going to lead the parade that's already marching, eventually it could happen. I don't see it happening right now, unfortunately, and that's much to my great disappointment. Valerie Lundgren gives us $10 Canadian. Love the Rebel. Did you get a chance to look at any of the videos on Cistern W regarding Canada? I did not, but that is kind of because one of our journalists was arrested and thrown in jail. And the riots broke out, so, that sort of sucked up all the oxygen. Sorry, but I will get back to that. Derek G gives us $5 Canadian. Is the present extreme political division sustainable? What is going to happen with that many socialists? Derek, I think those socialists are going to be Canada's problem when Alberta leaves. It's not going to be my problem. It's going to be sad to see, just like in the same way that I always cheer for the Republicans in the United States, because I think that conservatism is an ideology where people prosper economically, freedom prospers, and so when Alberta leaves, I'll be cheering for the Conservatives to win in the rest of the country, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be my problem.
But something, Sheila, that would be one of the hurdles in terms of a Wexit, in terms of Alberta leaving, is the Federal Conservative Party. They would fight that tooth and nail, because without Alberta, let's imagine a parallel universe where Alberta does become its own country, separate from Canada. Could a Conservative government ever get a majority mandate again in Canada? It might be impossible.
No. And that's the thing. Most of the resistance to Alberta leaving there's a lot of people who want to see us fail, but there are a lot of people who want to keep us because we are the backbone, really, of the Conservative Party of Canada. We're all the, Alberta and Saskatchewan and the interior of BC, it's a blue sweep. We're reliably Conservative voting, reliable volunteers, reliable donors. We're the war chest of the party. Without us, the Conservatives never win this country again, and they know that. So they're going to do a lot to discredit whoever will step up to lead a separatist party in Alberta.
By the way, Sheila, I know you're really good at sewing. What would the Republic of Alberta flag look like, or would you just keep the provincial flag that you have right now?
I do kind of like the provincial flag. It is really pretty, and it is reflective of all parts of Alberta. It's got the mountains, the prairies, but I resent, and it didn't happen to me. It happened 100 years before I was born. I resent the fact that we were supposed to be the province of Buffalo, us in Saskatchewan, and they broke us apart. And they drew a line, an arbitrary line, right down the middle of what would have been us. And I think the new flag, if we ever leave, should maybe have a buffalo on it just for spite.
Oh, that's interesting. And by the way, I'm going to give a trivia question. I'll give the answer at the end of the show. Speaking of Buffalo, the Buffalo Sabres NHL hockey team, it is a unique logo in the entire world of sports. And I would like somebody to chime in. What makes the Buffalo Sabres logo unique? Carry on, Sheila.
Okay, I think we're all cut up, actually. Yes. Yep, we're all cut up.
Okay.
Nope.
Well,
Yeah. Well, I'll get that other one later. It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay then. We know we were talking about the clampdown on freedom journalistically, but of course there's a clampdown on the economy, especially in Ontario. And I have the stats to back me up, folks, on that. There was a survey done of economic freedom in the provinces. Alberta was number 1, no surprise there. Number 9, which is a bit of a surprise, is Ontario. Only Newfoundland is worse. And here's a story about a little diner who tried to open, and maybe you'll understand why Ontario, a province that was supposedly going to be open for business under Doug Ford, has such an appallingly low ranking. Here we go. Say in this day and age of the Wuhan virus, the food service sector has been especially hammered. You can't open up your restaurant for sit-down clientele. The government says takeout and delivery only, but I've spoken to other operators. They say their takeout and delivery sales amount to peanuts, especially if it is a sit-down operation. Now, last Friday, you decided enough is enough. You decided to open your doors to sit-down customers. What happened?
Well, I opened up for breakfast. I had some good supporters come up from different areas. Some regulars came in. They came in, sat down. We had to follow the same protocols that I had in place. Spaced them out equally. The servers were all, sanitized and masks on. And basically, we went for a while. The breakfast rush was just kind of dwindling out. And there's that law between lunch and then also the health inspector showed up. And I was outside behind the building, and I had to come back around, and they were in there. And then the police also as well showed up, and basically they said shut her down. And at that point, it could have been a $500,000 fine. And I
wait a second, $500,000 fine they were threatening you with?
Yeah, it was $500,000. That's what it could have been. And at this point, I was really take the risk. I mean, when you're desperate, you become a different person. You're just trying to keep alive. You're trying to keep your business alive. You're trying to keep the workers employed. They've been here 7 years, these workers, and they love this place. We're like a family here, and I just want to see them employed.
Jason, to me, this is downright perverse. We have correctional facilities in Ontario letting criminals out of their buildings, some of them violent, some of them quite nefarious, so that proper social distancing can be maintained. But meanwhile, a guy like you that wants to whip up a bacon and egg special for your clientele, you're going to face a $500,000 fine and potentially a year in jail. I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that you work so hard and put all this money and effort, get a business going, established, you're a staple in the community, and that you all of a sudden become a criminal for serving bacon and eggs. I mean,
Sheila, my heart broke interviewing Jason Lake. He's just, as if the restaurant business isn't hard enough to compete in. In the best of times, it's something like 80% of new restaurant openings fail in the first 3 years. Now comes this pandemic. Now comes this perverse scenario where violent offenders are being let out of jail, but a guy that wants to cook up some eggs Benedict is being threatened with up to a year in jail and $500,000. And he is so desperate because he is facing bankruptcy. He is actually contemplating reopening again. He only got an $880 ticket, but they warned him it will be the $500K ticket next time. And basically he said to me, he said this off camera, is what will it matter if I'm bankrupt? They won't be able to collect anyways. This is appalling. Come on, Doug Ford. I can go to Stockholm, Sweden and have a sit-down meal in a safe environment, just like what Mr. Lake was trying to provide. Why can't I do it in Ontario, the province that is supposedly open for business?
Yeah, people can crowd the streets and protest racism they think is happening in another country, but this Ontarian cannot open his business to serve people. It's crazy. The double standard is outrageous. We just got passed along something. I sent it to Justin, the producer, and I want to make note of it because we have heard very little from the Civil Liberties Associations about what happened to Kian at Justin Trudeau's press conference a little while ago. I think it's almost 2 weeks ago now. But our friends, the freedom fighters at the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, has actually issued a warning letter to Justin Trudeau. It says that excluding alternative media from his press conferences is a violation of the Charter-protected freedom of the press and other media of communications as set out in Section 2B of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They say their letter is a response to the Prime Minister's staff denying access to Canadian journalist Cian Bexley of Rebel News to attend a press conference at Rideau Cottage. While other journalists were admitted to the press scrum and allowed to ask Mr. Trudeau questions, Mr. Bexley was manhandled by security and physically removed from the grounds. The Charter protects Vox, Huffington Post, Vice, Rebel News, The Tyee, Rabble.ca, Press Progress, True North, Ricochet, LifeSite News, and North 99, whether as the press or as other media of communications, stated John Carpe. So I think that's great. This is I was reading while watching your video there, and it says, Rebel News is not known for its sympathy to Justin Trudeau or to the Liberal Party. This is precisely why denying Mr. Bexley access to the Prime Minister's daily press briefing at Rideau Cottage leaves the impression that the federal government is deliberately trying to shield itself from criticism and accountability, stated John Carpe. I am very grateful that they took the time to send a letter directly to Justin Trudeau defending Cian's right to just do his job like every other journalist that was there that day. So thank you, John Carpe and the guys from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms.
Yeah, John's a good man. And by the way, Sheila, the way you began that, I almost thought you were going to say that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association.
Oh, no,
but you know,
David, you're talking crazy.
Yeah, you know, with the fellow who heads it up, who likes to have a bicycle as his hood ornament, Mr. Bryan. But they're more concerned about going back to the diner story, about getting prisoners out of jail than they are about press freedom or just regular people that we've covered, from your fantastic New Brunswick case of the guy in the parking lot having a coffee and a donut, to the stuff I've come across, the young 18-year-old skateboarder in Pickering, Richard Paradiso, the man that got a ticket for complying to get out of Trinity Bellwoods Park. And they don't seem to care about that. They care about prisoners being given their freedom, even if they're violent, so they can socially distance. What kind of bizarro world are we living in, Sheila?
Yeah, you guys have a 3-time murderer, a guy who murdered his entire family, out on release because of COVID-19. He's from Hamilton. He butchered his entire family because he was having an affair with, I think it was the office secretary or something to that effect. But yeah, he butchered his wife and his 2 small children to take up with this other woman. And he's been released because he's in precarious health, you see, and we don't want him to get the COVID. I cannot think of a more deserving person to get the COVID, but that's just me. But yeah, he walks the streets free. He gets to live with his girlfriend now. How do you get a girlfriend when you're a 3-time murderer? But yeah, he's living with his girlfriend now. And yeah, that's because Ontario released him because of the COVID. And we have a couple more super chats before we end the show. Derek G gives us $5 Canadian about my past question on division and sustainability. I meant for the Western world. Yeah, it's strange. The Western world, I think, is sort of recognizing, maybe, I think, except for Canada, that the division in the world is unhelpful and moving towards a more autonomous way of governing themselves. We saw that with Brexit. We see that with Donald Trump, with his America First policies, but we just don't see that in Canada. And I think maybe it's because there are 2 Canadas, and there are people who believe in autonomy and doing things their own way and freedom and free speech in certain parts of the country. But there are other parts of the country where those values are just not values that they hold. And I think it's always been like that from the very beginning. And it's just becoming more and more evident now.
I agree.
What else we have? David Anderson gives us $5 Canadian. I don't see a super chat. Oh, yes, I do. If Wexit happens, socialists will leave and real conservatives will find a home. Good times for all. CCP, Delinda Est. I have no comment. You said it great. Kane Enmark gives us $2 Canadian. Sheila, you are the bee's knees. David, you too. Yeah, he's okay, isn't he? And JC Steck gives us $5 Canadian. I don't see a super chat, but thank you very much. And David, it is 1 minute to the end of the show.
Well, you know what, Sheila, then before we wrap this up, first of all, thank you to all you who tuned in. A special extra thank you to everybody who gave a super chat. Also, I promised, I don't know if anyone weighed in on my trivia question of what is unique in the world about the Buffalo Sabres logo when it comes to sports uniforms. It's this, folks. It's that both the city and the nickname of the team are graphically represented. You see, they use the buffalo and they use the two swords for the Sabres. So what I'm saying, Sheila, I see you're kind of glazing over because I know you're not a sports fan. You can't represent Toronto or Edmonton or Vancouver with a logo, with you know a physical logo, but you can do that to Buffalo because there's a buffalo. It's an animal. So that's my wow. I don't think this is going to catch on like the $64,000 question, no. but that's a piece of trivia.
The last minute of everybody's time, so great.
You know, I'll tell you, everyone listening to this little anecdote will be saying it in the near future. What's unique about the Buffalo Sabres logo?
No,
I bet you, because when I learned about it, I was blown away. Anyways, we have gone a minute over, so. On behalf of Sheila Gunn-Reid and myself, David Menzies, thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for tuning in. And until next Tuesday, have a great weekend and stay safe.